black man, wearing a torn, old khaki jacket, walked into the lobby of a five-star hotel in Chicago. No coat, no fancy luggage, nothing about him said he belonged there. The front desk ignored him. The security guards avoided eye contact. No one knew that, less than 24 hours later, that same man would return, in a sharp suit, with a motorcade, and a business card that read CEO of the hotel group that owns the very building they were standing in. The entire hotel went silent. But what shocked everyone even more, the only person who had treated him with kindness was a janitor, someone most people looked right through. This story isn't just a lesson in manners, it's a wake-up call for an entire industry, that in a world obsessed with appearances, true character is the one thing money can't buy. On an early winter morning, the lobby of the Lancaster Grand Hotel was quiet as usual. Crystal chandeliers sparkled from the ceiling, soft piano music floated from hidden wall speakers. Everything radiated luxury and calm, the kind of place clearly meant for the elite. Behind the front desk stood Emily Monroe, a longtime staff member, adjusting the name tag on her uniform. She was strict, detail-oriented. To Emily, the hotel's image had to be flawless, from the way the tablecloths were tied to the type of guests who walked through the door. Just then, an elderly black man, likely in his 60s, stepped through the revolving door. His worn brown coat was frayed at the shoulders. His rolling suitcase clacked loudly, its wheels clearly worn down. His knit cap was askew, and his shoes were faded, with slight cracks at the toes. No one said a word, but the room seemed to pause for a beat. People glanced, then quickly looked away. Not overt hostility, but that subtle, unspoken, "you don't fit in here" kind of look. A woman in a gray suit stopped mid-sentence. A doorman took a step forward, saw the man's shoes, then turned away. The man walked up to the front desk and spoke, calm and composed. "Good morning. I have a reservation. Name's Walter Jennings." Emily glanced at him from head to toe. Her fingers tapped the keyboard, but her eyes didn't bother to meet his. "One moment, sir." The way she said sir sounded like she was trying not to trip over the word. The system pulled up the booking. Walter L. Jennings, 3 nights, fully paid, no special notes. Still, Emily hesitated. "Your room may not be ready yet. Housekeeping is behind schedule." A lie. The hotel was at 60% capacity. Entire wings were vacant. Mr. Walter just nodded, unfazed. Being sidelined wasn't new to him. He chose a seat in the far corner of the lobby and waited quietly. No one checked in on him. No welcome drink. Staff went about their day as if he had never walked in. Mr. Walter was still sitting there, quietly by the window. His hands were folded on the handle of his suitcase. Not angry, not impatient, just waiting. The kind of waiting that comes from a lifetime of being seen as not quite good enough. People passed by without a word. Staff beamed at guests in designer coats, trailing gleaming suitcases. One look, and you could tell. They belonged here. It wasn't until nearly noon that Marcus Bell, a housekeeping staff member, stepped out of the elevator, pushing a cart stacked with clean linens. He was tall, reserved, with broad shoulders that had carried countless silent overtime hours in his 9 years at the hotel. Marcus almost walked right past, until something about the old man by the window caught his eye. There was a neatness in his posture, a quiet grace, but also a kind of tiredness in his eyes. A tiredness Marcus recognized. The same look he used to see in his mother's face when she came home late from a long shift. He turned back. "Excuse me, sir. Do you need any help?" Mr. Walter looked up and offered a soft smile. "Thank you, son. Just waiting on my room. Seems there's a little hiccup." Marcus glanced toward the front desk, then back. No questions, no judgment. He simply nodded. "Let me get you something warm. That spot by the window gets cold." A few minutes later, Marcus returned with a thin scarf, still warm from the dryer, and a cup of hot water with a few slices of lemon. Not fancy tea, not 5-star service, just a bit of genuine kindness. "It's nothing special, sir, but it might make you feel a little more comfortable." Mr. Walter accepted it with a nod. No need for words, but in his eyes was something deeper. A quiet, sincere gratitude. At the front desk, Emily watched the entire exchange. Her jaw clenched slightly, as she saw Marcus handing the scarf and drink to the nameless man. She leaned over and whispered something to her assistant, eyes fixed on the scene before her. She didn't know, and didn't care, that this small gesture would alter her fate and the future of the Lancaster Grand. As for Mr. Walter, he stayed seated. No complaints, no demands. But his eyes, they were watching everything. That night, after the last guests from the conference had left the lobby, and the glow from the chandeliers had softened into the quiet calm of routine, Marcus was still on the 9th floor, wrapping up his final cleaning shift of the day. He was about to return to the staff quarters when his steps slowed near room 907. It was the room he had quietly prepared that morning. No instruction from the front desk, no mention on the assignment sheet. But Marcus couldn't leave the old man sitting in the lobby all day. Even without being told, he'd changed the sheets, folded the towels neatly, added an extra blanket by the bed, and left a small handwritten note on the pillow. "If you need anything, press 0 and ask for Marcus. I'll be on duty tonight." He wasn't sure if the room would even be used, but now, seeing the soft light seeping out from under the door, he knew Mr. Walter had checked in. A quiet sense of relief passed through him. Around 10 p.m., just as Marcus was reorganizing his cart near the elevator, the switchboard rang. "Room 907 just requested warm water. Can you bring it up?" The woman on night duty spoke flatly, without a hint of concern. "Just said, if it's not too much trouble." That last phrase made Marcus pause. Not because of the request, but the tone. Something in the way Mr. Walter had spoken made it clear. He was used to being brushed aside. No hesitation. Marcus headed to the small staff kitchen, opened the private cabinet where he kept a few extras, a simple porcelain tea set, some tea leaves gifted by coworkers, and a wooden tray he'd polished the week before. He picked chamomile, added a few lemon slices, and quietly stopped by the laundry room to grab a thicker blanket, one warmer than the standard issue. When the door opened, Mr. Walter stood there wearing a crisp hotel shirt, but his posture wasn't that of a frail old man. His eyes were sharp, his expression calm, but not cold. He smiled, as if he'd already known who would show up. "I figured it would be you." Marcus smiled back, placing the tray gently on the small table by the window. "I brought an extra blanket. Gets cold on the 9th floor at night." Mr. Walter sat down, pouring the tea with a steady hand, the kind of movement shaped by years of order and discipline. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "No one's watching." Marcus paused for a second, then replied, "I didn't do it to be seen. If my mother were sitting in a hotel lobby for hours with no one asking if she was okay, I'd hope someone would bring her a warm scarf and a cup of water." That made Mr. Walter fall silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. A rare answer, and a real one. Marcus didn't linger. He gave a small nod and turned to leave. But just as the door was about to close, Mr. Walter's voice rang out, low, but full of weight. "Thank you." Not the polite kind of thank you, but the kind that makes a narrow hallway feel wider, the kind that makes you feel, even just once, that you've been seen. That night, Marcus returned to the staff quarters and opened his phone to rewatch a video his young daughter had sent the day before. Her voice giggled through the screen. "Daddy, I miss you." Normally, he would have laughed, but tonight he placed a hand over his chest, where the warmth of the tea still lingered. In his mind, he saw again the old man's eyes, eyes that seemed to carry the weight of an entire life and understand it all. Marcus didn't know who Mr. Walter really was, didn't know why he was here, but one thing he knew for sure. Tonight, that man had been served with respect, simply because it was the right thing to do. The next morning, the first rays of sunlight filtered through the tall glass windows of the Lancaster Hotel, reflecting off the polished white marble of the main lobby. The rhythm returned as usual, front desk staff greeting guests softly, classical music humming from hidden speakers, travelers checking out with suitcases in tow, conversations filled with laughter. Everything was refined, everything was just right. But no one noticed that around 6 a.m., a man wearing a worn coat and dragging a suitcase with a crooked wheel quietly walked out the front door. He didn't call for a car. No one saw him off. Not a word was exchanged. He left the same way he had arrived, in silence. Brianna, the morning receptionist, glanced at him briefly and said nothing. To her, he was just another guest. Actually, less than that, someone not worth remembering. Up on the 9th floor, Marcus had just finished his morning round when he reached room 907. The key had been returned early. Marcus opened the door, not expecting much, but as he stepped inside, he stopped in his tracks. The room was spotless, barely touched. On the table sat a half-finished cup of tea, a neatly folded blanket, and a small note placed precisely in the center. The handwriting was clear and slightly slanted, the kind that came from someone more used to holding a pen than typing on a keyboard. Sometimes it's the smallest acts that reveal the biggest truths. Thank you for yours. No name, no business card, no contact information. Just a short, simple thank you. Yet to Marcus, it carried the weight of a book. He sat on the edge of the bed, holding the note, reading it again and again, afraid to miss a word. It was just a plain piece of stationery, but the message, and the feeling it left, warmed him in a way his routine rarely did. He slipped the note into his chest pocket. Marcus still didn't know who the old man was, or where he came from, or why he had stayed in such humble fashion. But he was certain of one thing. The man had once stood in a very high place, and had chosen to see the world from the ground floor to find out who still remembered how to treat others with humanity. At the same time, in the HR office, the managers were starting to relax. The rumors of a mystery guest from the parent company hadn't led to anything. They assumed either the person had never arrived or had come and gone without finding anything wrong. They had no idea that the man they once ignored in the lobby, the one denied even a glass of water and a simple greeting, was about to change everything. At exactly 3:17 p.m., 3 sleek black cars with no logos pulled up in front of the hotel. The doors opened. From a distance, Marcus saw the man step out, now in a perfectly tailored suit, a small flag pin gleaming on his lapel, walking between 2 sharply dressed assistants. And Marcus understood. It had begun. Mr. Walter didn't need an introduction. His presence changed the air in the lobby in an instant. Brianna, the morning receptionist, nearly dropped her tablet. The shift manager rushed out, face drained of all color. They all recognized him, not from frequent visits, but from company emails and internal newsletters. Walter W. Givens, Chief Executive Officer of Lanamore International, the parent company of the Lancaster Hotel. And this time, he didn't come in an old coat. He came in his rightful position, and he didn't come to rest. He came to ask one simple question: who still remembers the true spirit of hospitality? The next morning, the Lancaster Hotel lobby still shimmered under the chandeliers. The fresh flowers were replaced right on schedule, and the string quartet's soft classical tune drifted from the hidden speakers. On the surface, nothing had changed, but inside, in the eyes of the staff, in the pace of the workers, in the small conversations before shifts, something had shifted. Marcus Evans, wearing a hastily tailored navy blue suit, entered through the back staff entrance at exactly 7:30 a.m. No chauffeured car, no assistant. Just a man stepping out of the staff locker room, slipping on a pair of brand new brown leather shoes, taking a deep breath, and walking toward the front desk. I need all department heads in the lobby at 8 a.m., not in the meeting room, right here, in front of the hotel. His voice was calm, but left no room for question. The shift lead nodded without hesitation. Right on time, they arrived, one by one. Housekeeping lid, F&B supervisor, front desk manager, HR, maintenance, no one dared be late. None of them knew what was coming. Only that, for the first time ever, they were taking instructions from someone who, just yesterday, was folding towels and vacuuming on the 9th floor. Marcus stood with his hands behind his back, expression steady. "Thank you all for being on time," he began, his eyes meeting theirs. "I didn't call you here for a meeting. I called you here to ask one thing. Why is it that when someone walks through these doors, we don't call them by their name? We call them a type of guest?" No one answered. A cool Chicago morning breeze slipped through the revolving door. Marcus took one step forward. "I saw the looks you gave that old man, the one we now all know as Walter Givens," he said. "I'm not bringing this up to assign blame. I'm bringing it up to remind you. What happened yesterday was the result of habits we've allowed for far too long." Some lowered their heads. One let out a quiet sigh, but Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold. Instead, he gestured for a staff member to bring something out, a worn wooden chair. This chair is from the basement staff lounge. It's not pretty, not polished, not hotel aesthetic. He set it just outside the front entrance. But starting today, this chair will stay right here, every day, so anyone, guest or staff, can sit if they need to. No new suit required, no explanation needed. The team looked at each other. I know, it's just a chair, Marcus said. But because we once treated a human being like something out of place, today I'm starting with the smallest gesture, a seat, for anyone who needs to feel seen. At that moment, a middle-aged woman in an old wool coat walked through the front door, pulling a suitcase with worn handles. Marcus stepped forward, bowed his head gently and said, "Welcome to Lancaster. Would you like help with your bags?" His voice was sincere. No performance, no script. The woman looked surprised, then nodded and smiled softly. The department heads standing nearby, managers who were used to handling things through checklists and protocol, all paused for a moment. They said nothing, but they understood. The first lesson Marcus wanted to teach wasn't in any training manual, it was in presence, in how you treat someone with no status, in the kind of act no one photographs. But that defines everything. And from that day on, something quietly began to change at the Lancaster. Supervisors started coming down to the lobby each morning. Housekeeping staff were asked for their input before schedules were adjusted. Thank you and I'm sorry were said more often, and meant more when they were. No new rules were posted on the wall. But the culture had begun to shift, starting with an old wooden chair and a man who used to quietly fold blankets each morning. Call all department heads to the executive floor meeting room, now. Mr. Walter's voice was firm, not loud, but strong enough to make everyone stand straighter. Brianna hesitated, as if wanting to say something, but he had already turned and walked away. Within 15 minutes, the glass-walled meeting room on the 12th floor was full. The front desk manager, the guest services supervisor, the head of housekeeping, the sales director, all sat upright, hands on the table, eyes darting from one person to another, trying to guess why they were summoned. No one smiled. No one spoke. No one even dared to breathe too loudly. Marcus was the last to be called. Still in his housekeeping uniform, with a plastic name tag that read Marcus E. He had no idea why he was in that room. As he stepped in, every head turned toward him. Some frowned, some squinted, some looked away. Only Mr. Walter gave a faint smile. He stood at the front. No slides, no presentation, just both hands on the table, eyes scanning the room. "My name is Walter Givens," he began, his voice needing no introduction. "I arrived at this hotel 36 hours ago, under my real name. No disguise, no special request. I wanted to experience this place the way any regular guest would." The air in the room grew heavy. And I got exactly that experience. No greeting, no water. No one asked if I needed anything while I sat in the lobby for nearly 3 hours. I was ignored, judged, dismissed, all because I didn't look like someone with money. A tense silence. Everyone now knew who he was talking about, but none of them knew just how bad it had been. The only person who saw me as a human being, not an outfit, was a housekeeping employee. No high title, no authority, no fancy training from brand seminars. He didn't wait for direction, didn't need a system prompt, didn't need a certificate to know what was right. He turned to Marcus, and his voice softened. He was the only one who served me, truly served me. A cup of warm tea, a clean blanket, and a simple, sincere question. "Sir, are you okay?" The room froze. Marcus still didn't quite understand what was happening. "Marcus," Mr. Walter now fully faced him. "Starting today, you are no longer a housekeeping staff member." Marcus stiffened. A few people whispered. A light murmur rose from the far end of the table. "I am officially appointing you as head of guest experience. You will report directly to me and the regional executive board. Your job is to rebuild how this hotel serves people, not based on brand slogans printed on the walls, but by recognizing people as people." Marcus stood motionless, hands still gently clasped at his waist, trying to process what he had just heard. Mr. Walter walked over and extended his hand, not to shake, but to hand over a small envelope. On it, Lancaster Hotel, rebuild plan. Inside, just one line, build a place where no one has to prove they deserve respect. Mr. Walter turned back to the others in the room, some stunned, some lowering their heads in silence. Don't see this as a reward, he said clearly and calmly. This is a correction. Marcus is not being elevated. We are correcting a neglect. I'm simply putting him where he always should have been. He paused, then continued, firmer now. To those who ever said, this guest doesn't fit our brand, or delayed service because of someone's appearance, write me a full report and submit it by end of day. No excuses, no spin. If you don't, I will write it for you. There was nothing more to say. The change had already begun, and everyone in that room had only two choices left: face it, or be left behind. At that moment, Marcus finally looked up. His gaze was no longer hesitant. It was the look of someone who had risen from silence to strength. Not because he wanted to stand out, but because someone like Mr. Walter had finally said out loud, "We need more people like you in this industry." That afternoon, the Chicago air was crisp with early autumn chill. The Lancaster Hotel lobby bustled as usual, but no one could deny the atmosphere had changed. The unspoken tension was gone. Gone were the cautious glances at guests in worn-out clothes. In its place, genuine attention, not the kind that judges, but the kind that listens. Marcus walked into the staff lounge, the same place he used to sit and peel fruit with the housekeeping team. People were having lunch, chatting quietly. When he entered, a few froze, instinctively standing up. Marcus raised a hand. No need. Everyone, please continue eating. He poured himself a glass of water, pulled out a plastic chair, and sat down like he always had. Some eyes still lingered, unsure. Finally, Rosa, an older housekeeper from Mexico, who often called him the strong but gentle kid, asked softly, "Marcus, forgive me for asking something personal, but did you ever do what we do?" Marcus nodded, then looked around the small room. He set down his glass and spoke slowly. "I once worked the night shift at a rundown motel outside Detroit. I cleaned rooms, scrubbed toilets, pulled hair out of clogged drains. I stood in the rain opening car doors for guests who wouldn't even look me in the eye." The room fell silent. "I'm not saying this to inspire anyone," he continued. "I say it because I've never forgotten that feeling, doing your job well and still being invisible, hoping, just once, someone would call you by your real name." Rosa gently touched his arm, her eyes misty. "Then why didn't you tell us that from the start?" Marcus shook his head. "Because if I had, people would have treated me differently, and I needed to see if this place could treat people right, even those with no power, people like I once was, like Mr. Walter last week, or anyone who doesn't fit the hotel image." He pulled out an old photo from his bag and laid it on the table. In it, a younger Marcus with short hair was smiling beside an elderly woman in a wheelchair, wearing a loud blue uniform. "She was the first hotel owner to give me a chance. She told me, 'Remember this. Guests don't remember how perfectly you fold a towel. They remember how you made them feel.' I've never forgotten that." The room, cramped, dimly lit with flickering fluorescent lights, suddenly felt warmer, like a living room in a small, shared home. A young server named Jordan spoke up, hesitantly. "Marcus, if we have ideas to improve the night shift, like service routines or how break times are scheduled, could we send them to you?" Marcus smiled. "Send them directly, or write them by hand and drop them in the suggestion box, but sign your name, because I don't want these changes to be management ideas. I want them to belong to all of us." Applause broke out, not the polite kind people give a new boss, but real, honest applause. A few days later, a handwritten note appeared on the staff lounge bulletin board. "Marcus, thank you for not forgetting where you came from. Because of that, some of us are starting to believe that the future here has space for people like us. Laverne, Night Shift Laundry Team." And from then on, staff began noticing small changes. A new column on the schedule marked Family-Based Priority, a help bell installed in the ground floor restroom for guests in emergencies, team-led mini-meetings with topics proposed by the workers themselves. Not every change was big, but as Marcus once said, a small act of kindness, done at the right moment, can change the direction of an entire place. And Lancaster was starting to turn. 1 week after the turning point meeting in the executive boardroom, the Lancaster Hotel operated as if it had been infused with new energy. Not perfect, but unmistakably more human. Staff smiled more, not because they were told to be enthusiastic, but because they felt heard. Some longtime guests even commented, "Not sure what's changed, but this place feels more like home than it ever did." But that morning, when Marcus stepped into his office, he saw the day's schedule crossed out, with a red-inked note scribbled below. Urgent update from Regional. Prepare for VVIP arrival tomorrow morning. Identity confidential. Marcus frowned. He wasn't a fan of top-down secrecy. But as head of operations, he understood one thing. Sometimes challenges don't give you a heads up. He immediately called a department leads meeting. "We don't know who this guest is, but if this is a test, we don't need to perform. We just do what we've been doing, but with 100% intention." The front desk team nodded. Housekeeping echoed their agreement. Still, a quiet unease lingered in Marcus's chest. Guests who arrive under high confidentiality are usually powerful or problematic. The next morning at 6:35 a.m., a black SUV with no corporate logo pulled up in front of the hotel. From the back seat stepped a tall woman in her early 50s, wearing oversized sunglasses and a long beige cashmere coat. She carried only a small suitcase and a slim document bag, but from the way she moved, it was clear she hadn't come for leisure. Marcus was standing near the front desk. He stepped forward, greeted her politely. "Good morning." "Thank you for choosing Lancaster. I'm Marcus Wells, head of operations. If there's anything you need, I'm here." The woman nodded, removed her sunglasses. "I'm Evelyn Cross." Both Marcus and the front desk paused for half a second. Evelyn Cross, chairwoman of the board, Hospitality North America. She had the authority to shut down or greenlight any property in the system. "Thank you, Marcus," she said evenly. "I'm here for 2 reasons, to rest and to observe." She didn't ask for special treatment. No suite, no special room service, no entourage. She even requested that her identity remain confidential from the rest of the staff. Marcus met her gaze and nodded. "We'll serve you like we serve every guest, with genuine kindness." Evelyn gave a small smile, half skeptical, half intrigued. "I hope so." Over the next 2 days, Evelyn moved through the hotel mostly unnoticed. She dressed plainly, spoke little, but watched everything. She observed how receptionists answered phones, how housekeeping staff spoke in elevators, how servers refilled water glasses without being asked. She wasn't scoring surface polish. She was listening for what Marcus once called tone when no one's watching. On the 3rd morning, she requested to meet Marcus at the ground floor cafe. "You know," she began, "I've visited nearly 90 hotels in the last 4 years. Every one of them had standards. Everyone had experience scores. But only one, just one, where the staff called guests sir or ma'am, not out of duty, but because they genuinely didn't want someone to feel alone." She looked Marcus in the eye. "And that place is here." Marcus gently tightened his grip on his coffee cup. He didn't reply right away. "But I've also seen this," she continued. "In a place like this, the moral pressure is enormous. When someone does wrong, the damage runs deep. And I need to know, are you ready for that?" Marcus took a deep breath. "I'm ready to take responsibility. And I have a team that's ready to learn. Not afraid of being fired, but willing to do better." Evelyn nodded, a faint smile forming. "Good, because I'll be recommending that Lancaster become the pilot site for the Hospitality Ethics First program. The entire system will model after what you've started here." Marcus froze for a second. I'm not sure I'm good enough for that." "It's not because you're good," she replied. "It's because you're real." Then she stood, said nothing more, and left. That day, a single line appeared in the internal journal of the parent company, written by Evelyn Cross, Lancaster Hotel, A living example of what the service industry has forgotten. Humanity doesn't need advertising. It needs replication. From that moment on, Lancaster was no longer just a solid hotel. It became a new standard, born from the quiet leadership of a man who once folded blankets and stacked towels and never forgot what it felt like to be unseen. The change at Lancaster didn't just come from Evelyn Cross's praise or the new ethics program introduced by corporate. It ran deeper, into every break room conversation, into how staff began calling each other by first names, into the apologies spoken without a need to justify. But with that shift came a quiet question, one no one voiced out loud, only whispered between departments. What about the ones who got it wrong? Because everyone knew, and Marcus especially hadn't forgotten, that before Lancaster became more human, there were faces that chose the easier route. The wrinkled noses at guests who dressed too casually. The "sorry, our system's down" lines used to avoid serving those who didn't fit the mold. And most memorably, the avoidant glances the day Mr. Franklin Harris walked in wearing a tattered coat. One afternoon, Marcus stood in front of the admin office. On the desk were the files of 3 employees who had been reprimanded after that first critical meeting. Not fired, but marked. Among them was Ava, a young front desk assistant who had once worked directly under Mara. Ava was the first Marcus called in. She walked in with a straight back, but anxious eyes. "I know I got it wrong that day," she said immediately. "I didn't mean to look down on him, but I got used to seeing guests as tasks more than as people. I didn't realize how dangerous that mindset is until now." Marcus studied her for a moment. "So if you had the chance to do it again, what would you do differently?" Ava clenched her hands. "I'd start by listening, not by looking at someone's wallet or their clothes. I'd ask, not assume. I'm willing to start over, even from the lowest position." Marcus nodded. "I don't need you to start over at the bottom. I need you to help teach others the lesson you just learned. You'll assist with the new real-world hospitality training program starting next week. Okay?" Ava was speechless for a second, then nodded again and again. "Thank you," she whispered. 2 days later, Marcus called in 2 more staff members who had made smaller missteps, a waiter who once spoke carelessly to an elderly guest, and a security guard who had dismissed a homeless person asking for directions. Rather than landing on a list of internal warnings, the 3 were placed on a new track, ethical recovery, a program Marcus himself had created with the management team. At the internal launch of the Hospitality Ethics First Initiative, Marcus stood to speak, but this time without a pre-written speech. He simply told a story. "Years ago, I watched my mother, a janitor at a small hotel, get told she couldn't use the main elevator just because she wore a uniform. I was angry, deeply angry. But she looked at me and said, 'You can't control how others treat you, but you can choose how you treat them.' Today, I want us all to understand, we've all made mistakes, but what makes us worthy of staying is whether we're brave enough to make it right." In the audience, Ava quietly wiped tears. Others lowered their heads, not in shame, but in relief, in the feeling of being forgiven. Behind the hotel, next to the staff schedule board, a new sign was pinned up. "We don't need perfect employees. We need decent people who own their mistakes and know how to rise again." Lancaster never claimed to be a flawless hotel, but from that day forward, it became known as the only property in the region with an official second chance program, open to any employee who had stumbled, as long as they were willing to learn again. And that, more than any PR campaign or recruitment strategy, was what started bringing in hundreds of job applications each month. Not from people chasing just a job, but from people looking for a place where they could be trusted again. Less than a year after Franklin Harris announced the cultural restructuring of the Lancaster Hotel, the once quiet name, known mostly among old-school Chicago business circles, began appearing in hospitality trade publications, HR leadership roundtables, even mainstream media. Phrases like human-centered hospitality, second-chance employment, and serving values, not appearances, became tightly associated with the Lancaster brand in ways no one had expected. In a local TV interview, Marcus, now CEO, shared, "We didn't change to get famous. We changed because we couldn't keep living in contradiction with what we knew was right. If someone comes here for the media buzz, they may leave disappointed. But if they come hoping to be seen, no more, no less, this is the place for them. But the more recognition Lancaster received, the more pressure it faced. Honesty always comes at a cost, and sometimes it's higher than what people are ready to pay. First came the guests. Some arrived with open hearts, eager to embrace the people-first, policy-second culture. Others came to test it, to see if this so-called noble hotel still treats me well without a VIP card. There were guests who dressed sloppily on purpose, just to test the staff. Others secretly recorded greetings to catch mistakes. Lancaster began attracting not just trust, but skepticism. Once, a middle-aged man walked into the lobby wearing shorts, a tank top, and worn-out sandals. The front desk greeted him with the same full smile as anyone else. But the guest frowned. "I thought this place doesn't judge appearances," he said. "Yet I saw you glance at my feet 3 times. The receptionist, a new hire, went pale. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable, sir. I was just checking the sandals because someone slipped yesterday and we've been monitoring footwear for safety." The man paused, then nodded. "Good. Keep doing that. But remember, don't just look. Explain." Marcus received a report about the incident later, not as a complaint, but as praise. The guest had submitted a commendation. "I tested you, and you chose dialogue over defense. I didn't need more service. I just needed consistent kindness, even under suspicion." The second challenge came from within. Some longtime employees began feeling exhausted by what they called always having to perform. One security team member was overheard saying, "Back then, all we had to do was follow the rules. Now it feels like nothing's good enough unless it comes with heart." Marcus continued to stress that kindness wasn't supposed to be a performance. It was a standard of living. But he also understood not everyone grows up with the same ethical foundation, and not everyone has the stamina for lasting change. So he and the leadership team launched a new initiative, the Mirror Room, a private workshop series led by people like Ava and Josh, who had once gotten it wrong. No lectures, no corporate mantras, just real stories, real emotion, real regret, and the journey to make it right, not with slogans, but with sincerity. At Lancaster, Marcus said during one internal session, "We don't ask people to be saints. We just ask them to remember they're human." In the warm glow of the small basement hall, once a storage space, a new kind of stage took shape, not for applause, but for accountability. By year's end, Lancaster received national recognition as the most human-centered hotel in America, awarded by an independent ethics institute. Trophies were handed out, photos taken. Bookings surged for the next 3 months. But Marcus reminded his team, "Don't let awards make you forget what actually matters. We didn't start this to be recognized. We started because we once quietly watched someone who deserved dignity be ignored, and we didn't want to be that kind of place again, not for anyone else, but for ourselves." In a quiet corner of the ground floor, beside the deep brown chair near the window, a small bronze plaque was mounted without ceremony. It bore just one line: "If you have to ask who deserves to be treated like a guest, you've already forgotten that everyone deserves to be seen." And for Lancaster, this was only the beginning. In less than a day, a man who seemed like a nobody forced the entire system of a luxury hotel to bow its head and reflect. No shouting, no flashy displays of power. He simply watched, quietly, patiently, then acted at just the right moment, exposing every layer of pretense. And the doorman, the housekeeper, the ones who were looked down on the most, became symbols of kindness, of a value money can't teach: character. When the glossy surface is stripped away, one simple question remains: are you kind when no one's watching, when no one's keeping score? As one HR expert once said, "The way you treat someone who brings you no benefit is the way you truly live."